I can hide in my, my cannabinoid American, shell and have, didn't come out of the cannabis closet for a very long time. But the more people like me who treat it that way in a professional manner and are upstanding citizens, quote unquote, and go to work every day, the better it is. So live by example.
Hello and welcome to Here in LA, Beverly Grove edition. Today we talk with Adam Tschorn, a reporter for the LA Times who used to write about men's fashion and mustaches. Now he writes about weed and weed-infused drinks. He and his wife, journalist Booth Moore, live in Beverly Grove, which is so close to the Grove that Adam and Booth walk over there all the time. Adam and I talk about traveling to Europe for fashion shows, vaporizers, and the folly of naming your plants. So everybody, let's welcome Adam Tschorn. Hey everybody, I am here in Adam Tschorn and Booth Moore's beautiful home in Carthay Circle.
Actually, it's Beverly Grove.
Beverly Grove, we're in a new neighborhood. Beverly Grove.
Beverly Grove, which you can remember because it's between the Beverly Center and the Grove, but that's not really why it got its name, but that's an easy way to remember it.
Except you're more west of both of those places, right?
No, we walked, we're west of the Grove, but no, the Beverly Center is about a mile.
Is a straight shot?
A mile walk. No, you go up to 3rd.
Yep.
So we're on, not far away.
How long have you lived in Beverly Grove?
Since December of 2006, a couple days before Christmas.
So right before we met each other.
That's true. That is true.
You and I worked with each other at the Los Angeles Times at the old building. Yeah. At that time, you had a very interesting situation with your wife. In that, was she your boss?
When I was hired, she was one of the founding editors of the image section at the Los Angeles Times, and everyone thought that I was getting a free pass to get the job, but it actually took like 5 times as many interviews. And then even once I was hired, they made it very clear in the announcement that I'd be reporting to Michaeline Busico and not to Booth Moore. And so but we had worked together. Booth and I had worked together. I had hired her as a reporter at a tiny little newspaper in Vermont years before that.
Where you had met?
We had met in Vermont. Her parents used to be customers at my parents' country store.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. And then years later, when I was the editor of the Manchester Journal with 2.5 reporters, Booth was hired as one of those half reporters. Mm-hmm. And that was our meet cute.
Just general reporting?
Yeah, it was a lot of what we call refrigerator journalism. Like a lot of, your kid grew the biggest pumpkin, so you cut it out and put it on the fridge. There was lots of there was lots of planning and zoning stuff. And so Booth and I, when we first started dating, we would go out and we would call it site analysis, because one day we were out at the bar and we looked over and one of the guys from the planning commission was taking photographs of a site that was being developed, and he was doing site analysis. So that was the code.
You guys were smooching even when you were her boss.
When I was her boss, yeah, that's a bad look. I know.
But okay, it is and it isn't. Aren't most relationships formed in the workplace?
They were until the internet, I think. But
yeah,
yes, yeah.
And you guys are the shining example that not only can it work out, but it can work out even when one person is the boss of the other.
Well, technically, no. Remember, technically, she was not my boss.
But back then, you were her boss. You hired her.
Yes, that's true. Correct.
So that worked out. So who got the job in LA first?
Booth. Well, we moved out here. Her parents had a house in Vermont, about 9 miles from where my parents' house was. And we had a little country store, the Wayside Country Store. And her parents used to come in. In fact, when she first knew of me, I have a brother named Al. And my dad's name was Doug. And so there was Son of Doug and Funny Son of Doug. And I was Funny Son of Doug. And when Booth and I started dating, she had to tell her sister, I'm dating Funny Son of Doug. And so, yeah, I was the editor of the Manchester Journal in Manchester. And Booth had graduated from college and was staying at her parents' house in Vermont, trying to figure out what she wanted to do sort of as a, regrouping, and was going to move out to LA. And
that was always her plan.
That was always her plan. And then she started working. She applied for a job, and so she was there for about 6 months. We started dating, and then she was like, "Well, I'm moving to California." And I looked at the situation. I said, well, I can stay here and maybe make $10 an hour someday, or I can take a chance and get in a car with a beautiful blonde and move across the country to a place that I'd only been once before. And that's what I did. And that was 25 or 26 years ago.
Try to do the math. 98?
95 or 96, I think.
Okay.
We waited until my nephew was born and left. So got in the car and left and drove across country.
Had you guys lived together in Vermont?
Not really.
So this was the first time you moved in together. Do you remember where you landed in LA?
Yes, we lived in West Hollywood. Booth had come out first to find a place, and then we shipped like 15 boxes of stuff out by UPS. And she found an apartment on Larrabee Street in West Hollywood, and we lived on the same floor, a couple doors down from Angeline.
No.
And my favorite Angeline story is that when you first, in Beverly Hills Cop, when Eddie Murphy's walking down the street for the first time, it's a long shot, and he walks past two guys, and I think it was like gay guys or something. They had these weird outfits on, and it's just this shot of him like looking back and just doubling over in laughter because it's just so foreign to him.
Yeah.
We walked past Angeline on our floor that we lived on, and we were like, huh? What? We had no idea.
Because she looked exactly like the billboard.
And then we saw the billboards, and she had two of those pink Corvettes.
Oh.
And one of them was parked 2 cars over from mine. And the reason why I'm telling you this is that we came home one 4th of July from a wonderful day at the beach, and I was like, there are fire engines on Larrabee. There are fire engines outside of our building. A weird stalker fan had lit that second Corvette on fire.
Mamma mia.
And my little Volkswagen convertible melted in on itself. So I was a casualty of weird stalker fan. So.
Let's get to how you both became fashion journalists.
It's all her. So she, as you've met my wife, you know how stylish she is.
Yes.
And she's.
Well, you're no.
I learned it. I studied at her knee. So she started out working at the Los Angeles Times. So she was there for 18 years before she left in 2015.
She just comes to town and ends up working at the LA Times.
She got a job. She got a job doing the calendar listings. And in fact, and then she did SoCal Confidential, which was kind of her column.
Okay, but still, like Guns N' Roses in Welcome to the Jungle, that video where Axl just comes off of the bus, the Greyhound bus, and looks around, just like what you're talking about with Eddie Murphy and Angeline. She just applies for the LA Times and gets a job?
She had worked for a columnist at the Washington Post 1 year, and I think he knew like maybe Sherry Stern at the Los Angeles Times. And like anything else, what you make the introduction and then it's like you either have the skills or you don't.
Yeah.
And so
we're hearing a cat.
That Citrus, I thought maybe Citrus
Hi,
was
Citrus.
and so that was, but first she worked for Tiger Beat. Was it Tiger Beat? She was one of the first American journalists to interview the Spice Girls. And we have a photo of Booth with the Spice Girls like when they first came to the US.
Wow.
And so
in all their gear?
Them. Like, I mean, they weren't all up in all their gear yet. They were just
cute girls.
Just cute girls.
Wow.
So, and Booth reminded Victoria Beckham of
Okay,
that.
so there was a few steps in between the Vermont where you were working at,
right?
The Vermont newspaper and the greatest newspaper.
Booth knew what she wanted to do. Came out here, and I guess she had started to talk about that job. Hadn't gotten it. She was doing that. I got a weird game show question writing gig.
For what game show?
So it was called Majority Rules, and it was DreamWorks SKG's first ever show. Like right after they formed.
First TV show.
Yep. And it was actually on the air in Arizona and New Orleans, and we had applied. I know exactly where it is on Melrose. There was a pole hanging with those little things. Do you want to be in the audience? And we ripped the thing off, and we went. And it was like, if you're Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune, you can bust people in from Idaho and Iowa all day to sit there and clap like a trained seal.
Yeah.
If you're a new show, you need to do something. And so they paid you $40 for the whole day. And we sat there because we were like trying to find jobs and clapped like trained seals. And the next day, I had written the number down. I accidentally called it when I thought I was calling somewhere else. I got chatting with the audience person. She was like, "Oh, you're from Vermont?" She goes, "Oh, so-and-so is from Vermont." Put me in touch with someone who put me in touch with the executive producer who said, "You've been here. You've seen what the show is like. Write me some sample questions." And I did. And I go in to talk to him, and I see a picture of this guy with Spielberg, Katzenberg, and Geffen on stage. I was like, "Oh!" So I did that. That was the luck. That was a luck thing.
But okay, yes, there's a lot of luck that happens in LA, but there's also a lot of opportunity. This doesn't happen in Vermont. Your luck in Vermont was the beautiful blonde said, "Okay, I'll make out with my boss."
Right.
But I feel like these kind of opportunities are still happening in LA.
Yeah, I've always said that if I could give any advice to anyone about coming to LA, I would say try to find something to do, because there's a big pipe that sucks up all the talent and all the work. You just need to find a way to tread water at the mouth of that intake pipe long enough. You know, you can't just come out here and be like, "Okay, I've got a month's worth of stuff." You know, so I've had friends who have stayed. I will give them, like, "Sure, your kid has graduated from college, wants to come out, a month. I'll give you a month in my guest house. After that, you need to have found a place." But I've done that. And they're working people in Los Angeles. So you just need to be able to tread water a little bit. And so, yeah, there was a lot of luck, but there was some talent and skill on her behalf. And then I applied for the job at the LA Times.
Which job?
When they launched the image section.
Oh, so you came in as a fashion writer.
I came in as a fashion writer because, well, I had, it seemed like it was such a straight line, but it's not really, because Booth was in the fashion writing space. And so we moved in these circles, and Rose Apodaca, who worked with Michaeline and Booth to launch the image section, was the West Coast editor of Women's Wear Daily.
Oh.
Which was at the time just down here on Wilshire Boulevard. Mm-hmm. And Rose said one day, they're looking for a West Coast editor for DNR, which was the men's version of Women's Wear Daily. It was an industry publication. Frankly, reading an issue of it was like reading the label on a library paste. It was just like, what? But it was really good because it was sales and square footage, and you'd get on calls and listen to them talk about, I covered the surf industry, and I covered, like Levi Strauss and Vans and all that. So it was a really good, like, grounding thing. And I did that for just short of 3 years. And then they were launching the image section, and I applied for a job to do that. And so I started covering menswear for the LA Times in 2017.
Now, those of us who are more cynical may have looked at the image section as, well, this is just a great way for the LA Times to get full-page ads from these big designers and brands and fill it in with a couple stories. Because your competition, Women's World Daily, Vogue, all these other places are just ginormous. And Image was never larger than maybe even 12 pages, right?
I think maybe at one point, it was so long since there was the standalone section, but it grew slowly, and I think maybe we did a couple of 20-page sections.
Right.
But it was like a standalone section, and then it was wrapped in and it was wrapped out and standalone. But yeah, it wasn't like the New York Times style section.
Right. But the things you guys covered, you were able to pay attention to because you didn't have 100 pages to fill. And what I loved about working with you there was you handled men's fashion like a regular man would. You know, for example, I could relate.
Right. No, and I often felt that was because I didn't, unlike my wife, whose shadow we're talking about her as if she's here, always had loved fashion from the time she was a little girl. She defines herself through fashion. She loves it. To me, I grew up in Vermont where you got one plaid shirt and one pair of jeans and you're done. And so it was never really a thing. And so I even had friends later on that were like, you don't mind me saying it's odd that you're covering fashion. I'm like, no, but I also could cover it in a way I wasn't afraid to ask a question. What's an empire waist? I don't know. Look it up in the Fairchild Dictionary of Fashion, and you learn. And so I learned from Booth the formula of covering a show, and what the designer's inspiration is, and you say that, and then you say, and that was translated on the runway to blank, and it's like covering any other thing.
Right.
And that's the way I treat it. And
If you were throwing it, if you'd fall in love with a female sports writer, you would have covered the Dodgers the same way.
Exactly. And since I'm not a sports guy, I probably would have learned a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so here's you and Booth at the LA Times. She's not okay. Michaelina wasn't there forever.
No, I think she was only there for a couple of years before. I don't know.
But then Booth takes over.
So, yeah, there was always.
And she's your boss.
There was always someone like level, and they always, if you're trying to like gotcha, no.
No. I'm not gotching. What I'm saying is, I admire the fact that a married couple could work together in harmony. I heard a lot of drama going on in that building because I was lucky enough to work with every desk. I never heard drama with you guys.
Yeah. No, and that was the writing, and this is something that Booth always says, and I agree with it. The writing itself is a very solitary thing. Because people are always like, they scratch their head and they go, how in the world can you work with your spouse? I'm like, well, you married them, so you're together for a reason, right? And I mean, we started out working together. We started out working together at the Manchester Journal, and like I could say that I assigned her stories, but she came up with her own stories and did, and while I always reported to someone else at the Los Angeles Times, Booth drove the coverage of the image section.
Yeah.
And and it's great because we both have our own in-house, like, one of us will be like, I need to solve this with some funny. I'm like, what about this last season? So we're used to working together. So,
and at the end of the day, if I'm counting pennies, which they sure were when I was there, I mean, it was bankrupt the whole time I was there. If I'm going to send two people to Milan, how great is it that they are going to bunk together in the same room?
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing: they saved money on New York Fashion Week because I would cover the men's and she would cover the women's. But yeah, they did. There was some synergy and some savings. And I always thought that they should have made more hay with the couple that covered fashion together. But
totally. Yeah. I remember there were some rules at the LA Times about what we could take and what we couldn't take from the people we were covering. And the Times was very conservative. They didn't really want you to take anything. But I would imagine at a place like that, they would invite the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the LA Times maybe to a fancy dinner. Is that acceptable?
So the rule, last time I checked, I think the rule is anything of value more than $25 you're not supposed to accept.
Right.
If it's, yeah. So, but see, here's the thing. There would always be these meals. And it's funny, if you work in the food section, you're supposed to pay for every single meal. No one, I mean, you would go, mostly it would be, at the Missoni show, there'd be a big wheel of Parmesan and Negronis like before or after the show. This was the first time I ever had a Negroni was at the Missoni show in Milan. But yeah, no, you're not supposed to take anything.
I imagine hors d'oeuvres are kosher. That's fine.
But it made me half the man I am today. Literally, yeah.
But if a designer says, Adam, let me take you to this fancy place, you have to say no, huh?
Or you say I got to pay.
Right.
So, for a story, you and I, when we reconnected the first time in person, was at Nostalgia, right?
Yeah.
That was having that PAX event.
Yeah.
I went back with one of the writers from the food section. We're working on a story now. Went to the Secret Supper Club. That's a $295 meal. And we had to be very clear at the beginning, send us a bill, send us an invoice, you can track. So, no, I take that very seriously, that the appearance of impropriety is you don't want anyone to think you're on the take. And when I was in the fashion space, like, luckily, because of my size and shape, it wasn't like anybody would offer to dress me, right? Because I'm kind of like...
For those of you who are only going to listen to the podcast, will you describe your size and shape?
I'm a bowling pin. Essentially.
That is not how I would have described you.
No, I am more,
well, we're part of the Bald Brotherhood.
Yep, I have very little hair on my head. I am, I'm 5'11" and a half. My wife laughs at the half, but I'm well in the 230 range weight-wise. So I'm a stocky guy. You would not look at me and say fashion plate right away. I do wear, a stylish pair of LA Eyeworks glasses. But
yeah.
So
you used to cover the mustache, and was it the mustache and beard?
The World Beard and Mustache Champion.
Yes,
that was my first big LA Times, one of my first big memorable LA Times trips was
Very
to
memorable.
Anchorage, Alaska.
Yeah.
And-
That was the other cool part about it. It's way the hell up in Alaska.
Well, it's in a different. It's an international competition.
Oh.
Every 2 years in a different place, and this was only the second time that it had ever been held in the United States. And
Why did they pick Alaska?
yeah, well, you would not believe how much hair there is in Alaska. And I did a profile. I think it may technically have been my first column one story. I wrote about Jack Passion, the whiskered wizard of Walnut Creek, who had won the Full Beard Natural.
Walnut Creek, California.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so I went up to Walnut Creek and I interviewed him, and he had won. And it was like the first time I think that the Full Beard Natural means you just let it grow. You don't trim, you don't style, you don't groom.
No plucking?
Or anything. No plucking. And yeah, so I was like really into the facial hair thing for a while.
Let's talk about weed.
Yes, let's talk about
Because now you are the editor of Cannabis and Other Substances. I'm making up a title.
well, my
What's your real title?
So my official title still, even though I've pivoted away from fashion for like the last, I would say definitely since January of this year, but more in the last, since the pandemic. If you look into the LA Times records, I'm still listed as assistant editor, fashion. My outward facing title is senior features writer, because it's really confusing if my byline was like, fashion writer or whatever, and I'm writing about cannabis. And so, but that's officially my title.
Yeah.
But I don't cover fashion really. That's moved elsewhere, and cannabis is my thing.
But in a pinch, if they need you to write about fashion, you're there.
I'm there.
Right.
I serve at the request of, I will write fortune cookie fortunes. I will write snarky, anything. I will write it.
But it sounds like the pandemic and the closing of these shows helped your pitch for weed.
Well, right, because if you'll remember, right when things happened 2 years ago, that was when they decided that dispensaries were an essential business.
Wasn't that crazy?
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's great, but
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy.
No, I mean, keying back into the medical thing, which is how it started in California.
Yeah.
So you can be cynical if you want.
And I am.
But it allowed me, I wrote some other. I remember one of the early pandemic stories I wrote was about the rise in sex toys.
I do not remember that one.
It was like vibrators and other sex toys, and including, maybe this will be the first time your podcast has the word teledildonics.
Congratulations.
Which is remote controlled from afar. So it's like Bluetooth. You could have one person one place, one person the other, and yeah.
I've seen those in action.
I have not.
The cam girls use them.
Okay. Oh, right.
When you tip them, they get a little vibration.
Oh, you learn something new every day.
Let me ask you though. You say you've been. It sounds like you've been pitching that the Times should be seriously writing about weed for a while.
Yes, and if you look back, I've written one or two things back when Pineapple Express first came out. That was way back when. That was one of my first. I'm like, look, it's moving mainstream, and I actually wrote. It was a cover story of Image about that, but I felt very strongly, and yes, so I would have a memo that I would take out and dust off with every new editor and every new features editor, and circulate around saying, this is how I think we can cover it in a way that's unique.
So, are you in the union or not?
Oh yeah. Because I had no downline reports that reported to me. That's kind of cut off. Yeah.
Which would be a shame. I would love you to be my boss. Yeah. I mean,
I am a union steward, howsoever.
Are you?
Yes.
How about
very,
that?
Very proud.
I had a good joke that you stepped on.
I'm sorry.
Let's try it again. Okay. I would love for you to be my boss, even if you kissed me and made me move on the other side of the country.
I would follow you across the country.
In your pitches, did you ever use the Steve Lopez column where he got high and drove around a closed track? Do you remember that article at all?
I actually don't.
I bring it up because I feel like the LA Times often surprises me with its weed coverage, even not yours excluded, in that I feel like it treats it right. That I mean, obviously, Steve Lopez always has a tongue in his cheek on his non-homeless type stories. Yeah. But that is the way that you prove to the average guy out there. Not that the subscribers of the LA Times are average, but that's how you teach 60-year-old affluent people who subscribe to the LA Times that the weed of today isn't the boogeyman that they might think it is, or that has been projected from Don't Say No to all these other people, and that you don't have to be Snoop Dogg to be able to know how to have a career and be high at the same time. And so I'm curious, when you were pitching these earlier ideas, what the feedback was. And if
it was there was no feedback. It would just I would send it upline, and maybe once or twice in all the years, 3 or 4 years I was doing it, I would get we'll talk about this, or I'll talk to so and so about it. But
no, they didn't take you seriously.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Well, I don't know. I don't know how they took it. I don't know. I can't. I won't say that. But I never got a okay, let's go. Mm-hmm. A couple times, people were like, if you want to cover cannabis, you should move into the metro section. And I was like, no, I want to cover it. I want to cover it from the features side. We have plenty of people who write metro stories and things about the raids on mm-hmm. pot growers up north. I come from the feature side. I want to, I want to treat it in the stigmatized way that it should be treated, like every other thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Also, that's a cop out of theirs. Let's just move it to the real news. That way, if there's any criticism, oh my God, the LA Times is treating weed like anything else. Yeah. They could say, oh no, we're talking about the laws. We're talking to congressmen and cops.
So. I think that it only really got traction when my immediate upline editors were also enthusiastic about the coverage. And who knows, maybe, I don't want to ascribe, my reporter skills. I don't want to ascribe any motive to anyone that doesn't exist. All I know is that when things got moving for me, one was the pandemic, and two was having editors that were advocates as go-betweens between me and upper management. Mm-hmm. So whether or not upper management likes it or doesn't like it, I don't know. Or wants it or doesn't want it. I would assume that if they really didn't want it, the kind of coverage that I was writing, that the word would come down from on high.
It seems like they love it, because I see full-page front covers of your coverage and other people's coverage. I see it being treated like I would want it to be treated, as something A, that's illegal, B, has never killed anybody, so what the heck? If anything, I want more critical coverage of things like, why isn't it easy for Los Angelinos to just go to a park and smoke it, or go to a private club and smoke it? As far as I know, and you're the expert, there's only one private place that you can smoke weed right now.
So,
and it's in WeHo, right?
West Hollywood has permitted a bunch. Mm-hmm. The original Cannabis Cafe, that was the Lowell Cafe, was open briefly before the pandemic, closed during the pandemic. The Artistry, which I wrote about, is open. There are 2 or 3 others that are winding their way through the permitting process. Mm-hmm. But when I wrote about that one, I wanted to make sure that there wasn't one in Los Angeles County somewhere, because the headline on it was the only weed bar in LA. And I want to make sure there wasn't some tiny little place that got a permit.
Yeah.
And the Department of Cannabis Regulation, whatever the city one is, I get the acronyms all confused.
Yeah.
Wrote back and said there are no permitted places in Los Angeles.
Let's talk about that real quick. LA is the second largest city in the world, or the country. We are the world. What's the holdup? And by the way, I heard that Kat Packer, who was the weed czar of LA, has stepped down. I don't know if it was really her fault, or maybe just the red tape of LA that drove her nuts. But Why do you think it's taken so long for LA to get it together about this?
So my understanding, and again, I haven't done, this is second or third hand, I'm very cognizant about like not doing my own reporting, if I haven't done my own reporting, but everyone I've talked to, because I did a big story about social equity dispensaries, is that everyone seemed to feel that the city had its program because it had to have a program, not because they really were, and that goes back to like my coverage. I'm writing about cannabis in a way that I don't want it to be stigmatized, and I just think that they had to do it because it was, the laws have changed. We have to do it, but then do we have to really? Maybe we don't have to fund it, or maybe it wasn't a high enough priority. But I heard that it was very difficult with the staffing and everything. But that's just what I've heard. I haven't done any reporting myself. You know me, Tony. I would go down there with my little narrow notepad and my pen, and I would ask the questions.
Do you really bring the narrow notepad with you?
Oh, you do? I do. Yeah.
I love that little
It's
thing.
right in there on my desk.
I love that thing.
And I carry a Fisher Space Pen with me. It writes underwater and upside down.
How about that?
Yeah.
How much do one of those things cost?
I don't know. I mean, I've had it for it's never run out of ink, and you can write over ink blots. You can write in zero gravity. If I'm in zero gravity,
Well, you're echoing what my heart says, which is none of these people really wanted it. None of these governments want it. Maybe West Hollywood's the only government that actually is okay with it, which is why they have it. But even that is suspicious to me because they seem to not push back on liquor. Maybe gun stores, they push back a little bit. But here's this thing that they know does not cause a problem.
So one of the really interesting things about California is we kind of are in the LA bubble. You forget because LA has said yes, that it's local control. So the state passed Prop 64, gave local control. I just saw a statistic. I'm not going to get it right so I'm not even going to quote it, about the vast majority of the state where cannabis is not, there is no permit process to allow these stores, including, and so Planet 13, which opened was it Anaheim? Is it technically in Anaheim? I forget. Almost a year ago, was the first one in Orange County, because Orange County said no, but the individual cities could say yes. And
Santa Ana, maybe.
Santa Ana, yes. Thank you. I was getting it. And so when it was opening, I talked to the mayor there, and the mayor said, we did it as a way of combating the illegal dispensaries.
Right.
But now that they were opening this huge dispensary, other cities in Orange County were looking at it for the revenue, which brings me to, I took a class at the University of Vermont, my alma mater. I was a cannabis media fellow.
The Vermont...
University of Vermont.
But what's your nickname? The Huskies?
The Green Mountains. Oh, the Catamounts. The Catamounts. And I used to, the mascot used to be my roommate. And so I have somewhere a photograph of Charlie Catamount sucking a bong.
Really?
Yeah, somewhere.
What's a catamount?
It's like a mountain lion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, and we had a guest speaker in that. So I took this cannabis plant biology class now, all these decades after I graduated from University of Vermont. And somebody asked, what state is doing the legal cannabis right, and what state is doing it wrong? And of course, he pointed to California as a state that's doing it wrong. Colorado, he said, is doing it right because they gave a measure of local control. But you know what they said?
What's that?
They said, it's well within your right to not permit these businesses, but you cannot share in the revenue.
Oh. And I don't mean to pressure you. I don't mean to corner you or anything like that. You're one of the sweetest people I've ever met in my life. And if anybody's going to write about my beloved weed, I'm glad it's you. What do you think is the root of the obstinance of these local governments? Do you think it's their beliefs about the demonization of weed?
I think it's a generational thing. And I think I was just watching on CNN last night, Don Lemon was having a conversation with a Texas state lawmaker who was an out gay man. This state lawmaker said, I firmly believe what Harvey Milk said about the more gay people you know, and I don't remember the rest of the quote, but that's the way I feel about cannabis. Not to ride herd, the gay rights thing, totally different. I can hide in my my cannabinoid American, shell and didn't come out of the cannabis closet for a very long time. But the more people like me who are cannabis consuming people who aren't, have their ass macrameed to the couch eating Cheetos. So, okay, you have the stoner, the Cheech and Chong stereotype, and you've got, the more people like me who treat it that way in a professional manner and are upstanding citizens, quote unquote, and go to work every day, the better it is. So live by example.
Well, so that's one side of it, to sort of convert the higher ups to allow what has already been voted on. But the second part is the people. I feel like the people, overwhelmingly, Americans, are in favor of this.
Yes.
So who the heck are the local governments trying to protect? If the people want this, and we've seen from Colorado, the most extreme example in the U.S., and we've now seen from Canada, the most extreme North American country, the world doesn't end when you allow people to smoke weed.
I don't know, but see, the pendulum swings because what's happening, Oklahoma, the abortion thing got tougher. And Oklahoma is a really interesting thing because we just were there doing we did a video for the Green Room series, and it's like one of the most conservative states, but yet it allowed medical marijuana. So it's a pendulum swing. And I think, I don't know the root of why. All I know is that my parents' tune changed on cannabis when they knew that their son smoked cannabis.
Oh, really? They warmed up to it?
Yeah.
Because they saw that it didn't ruin your life. You were able to hold your job. You didn't do anything crazy. You didn't enter porn.
Why'd you got to bring that up? Because I did.
Re-enter porn.
You're right. No, did you know I was a porn writer? I wrote, that was one of my in-between jobs.
Get out of here.
No, I wrote for Playboy's Naughty Amateur Home Videos. I wrote the interstitials. That was one of my in-between jobs when I came out. I thought you were poking me.
My admiration for you has risen.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. And it was basically Playboy's Naughty Amateur Home Videos was ostensibly it was a send-in. They would send in videos of themselves, but it was always stuff from like the house, And my job was to write like the interstitials. There was 2 women and a guy, and they were in an underground bunker, and I had to write like some thing that was on theme, but that by the end they would all be having sex. It was softcore kind of thing. So the first one was I used my game show writing. It was Around the World in 80 Lays, and they were entering a geography bee because they wanted to earn enough money to go on a nudist cruise.
I will play the devil advocate for just a minute here, which is rare. Devil doesn't need any help. The one issue that I do have with legal cannabis is edibles. And what I've heard by talking to nurses, in my apartment complex, there's a nurse, and just other people who are reasonable, is with edibles, especially young people, but even people our age, when we go to the dispensary and we see this baggie of brightly colored, weird candies, fun-looking weird candies, we eat too much. I have eaten too much. And sometimes when you eat too much, you go to the ER. And what I heard was ER visits for overdosing on edibles skyrocketed anytime that a state would legalize the stuff. And it makes sense. We're not used to it. It's better weed than we've ever had. It's better concentrates than ever. And they taste delicious, finally. Because when we were in college, we'd make these bad pot brownies. And have you heard of all this stuff before?
Yeah, that's called Maureen Dowding. Because Maureen Dowd went to Colorado when cannabis was first legal. And she got a brownie at a dispensary. And she ate some of the brownie. Didn't feel anything. ate some of the brownie, didn't feel anything, ate some more of the brownie, ended up in near cannabis psychosis on the bed. And I always say, and this goes to the education, you can always take more, you can't take less. And something that I learned only after I started covering the cannabis industry is you could be a Class A Olympic smoker.
Yeah.
Be able to smoke your body weight in Iowa road weed, but when you eat it, it metabolizes. Did you know this? Metabolizes. It's when you smoke it, you combust it. It's delta 9 THC. When you eat it, it metabolizes through the liver, and it's delta 11. So it's similar, but you can affect you completely differently. So you can be a Class A smoker, and then you feel like a wet bag of sand. So and the length of time that it takes to kick in, and people want it to be, they want to have the same effect of like when I smoke off a joint, I know it hits me. Mm-hmm. But now there's nano-emulsification, which means, and I just talked to a guy for a story about drinks, because weed drinks usually taste nasty.
Yeah.
But we did a taste testing to taste better ones. At EBTS, the Elite Beverage Tasting Squad, and we tasted 17. But this guy, Scott Rickett of Rickett Brewing Company, described, and it was great. Once I find a really good way of explaining something, I'm gonna borrow it. He said, usually because they're fat soluble, the THC is fat soluble, which is why most of the time they're not going to say or is fat. Yeah, it's fatty, and so it doesn't really mix in with liquids. So the key is to make the particles really small. And he said, usually a THC molecule getting into your bloodstream is like throwing a soccer ball at a chain link fence. Nanoemulsification makes them so small it's like throwing a handful of sand at a chain link fence. And the light bulb went on. I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. So that is the onset time now is 10 to 15 minutes with the smaller particles. And in fact, when the artistry opened, they made it a point of finding edibles that had a quicker onset time because they didn't want people to be there and eat the edibles and then at the end of their hour and a half be like, oh, okay.
Right.
And then have it hit them later. So yeah, it's a really big problem. Part of it is, advances in making it get into your system quicker, but also you kind of have to be educated. Kind of like anything else, like driving a car, you gotta learn. Yes, that happens. People aren't used to edibles, but you gotta learn if you're gonna do it.
Are you a fan of edibles?
I wasn't until I started writing. I had never, because I was scared. And I think I might have done.
You were scared of what happened to me.
Well, I was scared of it happening to me because it's like Russian roulette, and I'm very impulsive, and I'm very like I want it now. With the feeling. It's not a social, like if you're having a bunch of people together. I'm a very social person.
Yeah.
I don't think I would sit around and pass a bowl of gummies because it just doesn't, right? But one of the very first stories after recreational cannabis in California, I wrote something for the food section about chocolate bars. And I tried a bunch of different chocolate bars. And there was one called défoncé, which is the French word for stoned, I think. And it is like Scharfenberger level chocolate. And, it's delicious.
You can't stop eating it.
Well, that's the problem, is that you eat it, and then even if you wait, you get the munchies. And we were supposed to go to Palm Springs the next day, my wife, my sister-in-law, and I woke up in the morning, and I'm like, oh no, my eyes are like burnt holes in a blanket. I'm like, I'm not going to drive. I'm not going to drive, So I got in the back seat. My wife said, I woke up 2 hours later. I was in Palm Springs. She said, you giggled like a baby the entire time. And so cooing and Googling, cooing to myself.
Let's go back to that PAX event that we had.
Okay.
The only reason I went to that thing, and I was up front with the publicist, I said, I'm not really writing for anybody right now. I had written about can beverage for Los Angelino, and I think that's how I got on their list. And I said, I'm not writing for anybody right now. And as a matter of fact, I'm in a tough spot about smoking because I've been coughing in the morning, like a terrible hack in the morning, and I don't even really inhale much. I just feel like at my age and after 30 years of whatever, I've hit a wall.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, that's what this is. PAX is a vapor device, and it's easier on your lungs, and you really should try it. And it's okay if you don't want to write about it. Please come. And so I'm so glad that she was cool about that. And I'm so glad
That's
that
Zoe Wilder.
Zoe Wilder.
One of the first PR people I met in the cannabis space.
Is she really?
Yep.
Thank
I
you,
met her at a
Zoe.
Candescent dinner.
Thank you, because it worked. I've been using this PAX Era, which I think is like $50 for the battery part, and then $30 to $40 for the concentrate. Don't cough.
Yeah. So.
And I get the high that I want to have, the traditional high, and it hits you when it's supposed to. It's cleaner. It doesn't smell like weed in your
It's
house.
funny you should bring that up because I am actually working on a clean weed story right now that involves PAX being the big player to get into the live rosin thing.
Yeah.
But PAX is the big name in dry herb vaporizers, and so that story's not done yet either. But I spoke to a doctor, Dr. Peter Grinspoon, who happens to be the son of Dr. Lester Grinspoon, the famous in the weed space.
Is he?
Yeah, the late Lester Grinspoon. Peter Grinspoon, because I know my editors are going to say, if I'm talking about the clean weed movement, they're going to say, well, does that mean my regular weed is dirty or bad? And he is a doctor, and he said his first suggestion would be the least harmful to your body of cannabis consumption would be edibles.
Right.
No doctor, he said, no doctor is going to tell you that it's okay, is going to recommend that you inhale.
Right.
But if you're going to inhale, a dry herb vaporizer would be the second best because it heats the cannabis to release the THC and doesn't combust because you're burning all the biomass that's in there when you smoke.
And so PAX is most famous for
its dry herb vaporizers.
The PAX 2 and now the PAX 3.
PAX 3, which has a little insert, I guess, that you can use concentrates, which don't get me started on concentrates.
I won't. PAX 3 is like $300 now?
Yeah, I think.
Which also kind of put me off. I was like, Jesus.
There's this big movement in, like, Puffco just came out with this new concentrate thing, and it looks like a pipe. It looks like a Sherlock Holmes pipe.
Yeah.
And it's for, what people are using the Puffco Peak for.
Right.
With things that look like it's out of Star Trek.
The Puffco Peak looks like a traditional bong.
Yeah, it's kind of like more angular. It's angular.
But it's modern.
Yeah.
It's modern.
Yeah.
And that too is expensive.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is all these things, and the bead, the Nespresso machine of weed that I wrote about, all these things are about like $300.
Right.
And it's like, do you need any of these $300 things? Probably not. But it just shows what cannabis consumer these people are looking to attract.
Right.
So.
And I mean, my argument is you recently on the Green Room did a thing about the Moda bongs and these beautiful glass bongs and the craftsmen who make it and all that kind of thing. We cheap out when we go to the head shop, but some of our bongs have been with us forever.
It goes back to it's kind of the same conversation that you were having a couple of podcasts ago about who makes your disco pants and your t-shirts. And yeah, just because you can buy an $11 shirt and the markup on that. So I'm going to pull that forward and say, I think a lot of people don't think about it. Mm-hmm. Like I said in the story that accompanied that video is I've had plenty of bongs in my life and I never thought about who made them at all.
Right.
And they created that company, that brand, to draw attention to that. And now I can't help but think, who made it and shouldn't they be earning a living wage? And again, like I'm blessed enough to be in a place where I can think about paying for an expensive. I mean, the bongs are. See, the thing is, those bongs are all the same price as these other bongs because everyone thinks these other bongs are made in the U.S. So round and round it goes.
But if it's good, you're going to have it for a long time. And if it's and by the way, Mr. Tschorn, when I was in college, an eighth of weed cost more than it does today. It's the only thing in my life that's gone down in price.
Even with taxes?
Oh yeah, we paid a lot of taxes to that guy at the corner.
No. Even with
I remember writing an article in college saying, "Don't pay $40 for an eighth." Because if it's a black market, if we all do this together, then people will know in Santa Barbara you can't get away with $40 eighths. Because I remember some great $35 eighths back then. You can get $35 eighths today in some places. In LA.
not legal.
Maybe. I mean, do you ask?
I actually recommend
You
people
ask.
check CA Pot Check to see if
Okay, well, I'll put it a step further. You've got a beautiful house here. You could grow it here. It'd be free.
I've grown 2 plants.
Have you really?
Yeah, I have.
Was it easy or was it hard?
It's easy to grow. It was hard to smoke, as what I say, because I accidentally named it. I named my plant, and I grew up in Vermont, and they're like, you have your pet animals and you got your food animals, and you never name the food animals. And I made the mistake of naming it.
Did you play around with that PAX era that they gave you?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What surprised me about, okay, first of all, I kind of feel bad that you and I were bonding and catching up, and I wasn't paying attention to those chefs and the people who actually made those concentrates, because what I did garner from them was they take a lot of time making sure that this is clean and it is healthy, and the way that they make it isn't butane and all this other stuff, because you can taste it. It tastes good. And there's very few experiences of inhaling things in my body that actually taste good, like no question about it. Let's talk real quick about celebrities.
Okay.
You have smoking weed with...
So David Crosby,
Not bad.
right? So he taught me how to roll a joint. And
Not bad.
Yeah.
Did you grow up loving his music?
I grew up in a country and western household.
Oh.
But
So both kinds of music.
yeah, country and western. But obviously, like from the time I was 15, I was obviously aware of.
So were you a little nervous being...
I was super nervous.
Yeah.
Because the guys on the video team had put together this for the Green Room video, and he was going to teach me how to roll a joint because he has the column in Rolling Stone and all that. And I think I'm a good writer. I don't think I'm a very good interviewer.
Really?
Yeah, because by the time I get done doing all the research, I already know the answers. So why am I going to ask you? But part of it's to ask you to get you to say it,
Well,
right?
because people surprise you, though,
Yeah,
right?
And we talked about, it was funny because so many places picked up the story because I had asked him about, because the Beatles, he was the go-to for the Beatles when they came to the U.S. And he did this, and so John said, kind of thing. And it was just this funny, like it was only a tiny little part of the interview, but like Yahoo News or whatever picked it up.
Boomers are crazy about the Beatles.
And he mostly prefers a PAX now.
Does he?
Yes, but because it's easier on the lungs,
Right.
right? And he's a singer.
But he does like the PAX 3 with the flower.
Yeah.
Or the PAX 2 with the flower.
Yeah, the PAX 2 or 3,
Whatever.
It was flower, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then at the end,
Flower from his backyard.
yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And
So that was great.
So that was great. And then, as I told you earlier, for like 2 weeks, I was like, oh my god, I hope I didn't kill Dave Crosby, because it was in September, long before there was any vaccine sort of thing, and I was like, oh my god, because I will not live this down. That's infamy. But like you said, it's not his time.
You were nervous because you shared a joint together.
Well, first I was nervous because of the interview, but that went fine. And then that we just it was just that snap decision that am I really going to pass up that attempt to someday on a podcast say,
Also, isn't it a little rude
yes,
not to accept?
yes, true.
And also, as a journalist, I feel like you got to.
yeah. So that,
And you didn't. You didn't kill him.
nope. And he didn't kill me. So we're good. We're square.
You smoked with Seth.
So, okay, my bucket list, I would love to smoke with Seth. I smoked next to Seth. Because
he was being
I've
careful.
interviewed him twice. Once when he and Evan Goldberg launched Houseplant.
Yeah.
And then a year later when they created the Houseplant House, which is sort of display all their wares and their ashtrays and all that stuff. And that was when we had now we have the video series.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was an opportunity to do that.
We started with flour and ashtrays that we designed. We have new tins on the way, which are a little easier to open because these are, these are not the easiest to open tins in the world.
That's going to be one of my questions about like what things you've learned.
Yeah, that's one thing. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing we learned is like our tins were a little more difficult to open than people liked. And we talk, every week almost, we have calls with the dispensaries that actually sell our weed. And me and Evan will Zoom with the bud tenders and the people who work there and the people who own
Just
them.
encourage them to say something negative.
We very much encourage them to
Very
give
nice.
us feedback. They were very, people love the weed. They're thrilled about it. It's a little harder to open than they would prefer. And so we did that. But in general, because of that, it's been very positive. Yeah, we have a lot of these ashtray sets.
It seemed to me that Seth, was he stoned or was he bored? Has he given that tour too much, do you think? He didn't seem as excited about it as you were.
Well, yeah, because see, he deals with a whole bunch of people like us all the time.
Yeah.
We deal with him, right?
Once.
He and Evan, and I always make it a point that it's the both of them because I know that everybody's like Seth, and and there's the two of them, and they created. Did you know they created the name Pineapple Express? It was not a strain before.
Really?
They created it for
the movie.
I had to do a correction when I first wrote about it because they name all their strains after weather systems, and I said, and I actually, it was the best correction I ever had to write. I was like, it was actually a strain name that they created for the movie. So anybody who says Pineapple Express existed before the movie, it's just not true. So, but when he came into the house, we were there setting up for the video. You could hear his laughter the minute he came in the back door, like feet away. And he's a very enthusiastic person. I think his level of cannabis consumption is just different than the rest of us. And, it was a great, so if he seemed bored, that's my bad for not
That's not your bad. His energy level just seemed a little low. If you made me do the same thing over and over, I'm just not going to be into it. Let's wrap up with your neighborhood.
Oh, I love the neighborhood.
What do you love about it?
So it's called the Beverly Grove neighborhood, and I didn't know it existed until when we were looking for a house, and our agent was like, we looked at a bunch of places, they weren't quite in our thing, and he was like, there's one house that just went on the market today. And he brought us over here, and we were the second people in the door, and my wife was like, those people came here in a Mercedes, they're going to make an offer. And so we need to make an offer. So had never heard of it before, and it's bounded by, I think it's Crescent Heights, but it could be Fairfax. It could be Fairfax. Do you know Mapping LA? Do you have the mapping.la Times?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's basically, I think it's Crescent Heights to San Vicente on the west to, and I'm not quite sure, it might be 3rd Street or maybe Beverly on the north and Wilshire on the south. And I am all about a sense of place. I love to give things names. Like, I can't not, if you have a name tag, I cannot not say your name on a name tag. Names, places. And it's very close to LACMA. And like 4 blocks from LACMA we live. And there was an exhibition about between the two world wars, about how LA was grew between the two world wars. And there was a picture, 2 framed black and white aerial photographs. One was an aerial view of, ostensibly, of where LACMA is, but not far from here, in 1920. And one taken from the exact, it was amazing how well they could position it, 1930. And the 1921, the 1920 version was, you could see Fairfax and Wilshire. And it looked at first like the rest was a field.
Yeah.
And then in the 1931, completely built out as if it was today. And it was so well matched up that I looked at the 1920 version. And I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at it, and I'm counting the houses on the 1930 version and going the same distance. And I'm like, is that an airplane? So I went down the rabbit hole on this. And it turns out that in the 1920s, Charlie Chaplin's half-brother Sid built an airfield on the south side of Wilshire.
Really?
And then Cecil B. DeMille, who had an airfield up on Melrose, wasn't going to let that stand. So he built an airfield just about in what's now Beverly Grove. And it was the first, I went down, there are on the internet, you can find ghost airfields and the coordinates. And I can't say it with 100% specificity because it's been a while, but you find those coordinates and you put in the coordinates of where our house is. And I like to think that we were at the end or the beginning of CCB DeMille's airfield, which for a couple of years between the time that it opened, and so our house was built in 1926. I went into the LA Times archives and could find the ads for selling the property. It was the first airfield to fly passengers and mail out of Los Angeles.
Wow.
And it's like, and you can find all these pictures in the UCLA archives of like, you'll see Fairfax and Wilshire and there'll be like an oil derrick and that kind of thing. So
When you and your lovely wife want to take a stroll and have a dinner in the neighborhood, do you do such a thing?
yes, we did a lot more. We're trying to get back in our post-pandemic, out and about legs.
Yeah.
One of our,
Where would you go?
One of our favorite places, Animal on 3rd Street. It's the John and Vinny's guys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
So 3rd is really close to you.
yeah.
So we're talking brunch heaven.
Yeah. Like, and the great thing is that, and this neighborhood, Beverly Grove, has a 97% walkability index. It's great because we can walk over to the Grove.
Yep.
In the original farmers market.
Do you walk there?
Yeah. It's like a half mile, and it's like
That's all?
It's so much easier than trying to navigate parking. Like, I wouldn't take the car there unless I need to load up furniture.
Are you two movie theater goers?
Yeah.
I've got the AMC monthly pass. I just saw the Buzz Lightyear movie yesterday.
I think we saw. What did we just see?
But now that's AMC, you guys could see 3 movies a week over there.
I had not thought about that. We're into documentaries right now. We're just watching. We got back from Yosemite and we're watching Free Solo. We watched Free Solo.
Wasn't that great? Crazy, huh?
I was like, I wanted to Google and find out if the guy was alive or dead.
I'm so glad it wasn't spoiled for you.
Yeah. So, so we would go up. Yeah, you could walk up to 3rd Street.
So do you guys go to the Grove all the time since it's that close? I mean, Farmers Market is by itself.
Yeah. Like
right?
we go to Monsieur Marcel, both to eat the moule frite there, and it has
the moule frite. What's that?
Moule, mussels and with fries.
Oh,
moule frite. Yeah.
Ooh, pardon.
And they have, that's where I got the charcuterie plate for the Elite Beverage Tasting Squad. So go to the Grove, the Farmers Market.
Yep.
All the time. 3rd Street. So we have.
So you got a Whole Foods near you?
Yeah, we have a Whole Foods again right across the street from there.
Did you go to the Britney Spears experience before?
I did not. Had I known that there's going to be all that. That actually was all painted and everything. Did it ever really open?
I think maybe it opened for a week.
Yeah.
And for sure, the LA Times got to see a sneak preview.
So, and then, and you can just anything on 3rd Street. We do a lot because I knew this was going to come about.
Do you go to John and Vinny's?
Or to Animal? We haven't been to Animal in a long time, but that's one of my.
But John and Vinny's isn't that far away, though.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
All the stuff on 3rd Street. We tend to during the pandemic we ordered out from Bao Dim Sum.
Because you're so close to the museums, do you find yourself at the museums often?
Yes, we are members of both LACMA and the Academy Museum, which I included in my 10 most brain-bending places to be high in the city. So
the upstairs dome area is what you're talking about?
No, the round part that's on the inside of on the outside it's that curved gold thing. On the inside, it's the several screens with the space travel.
Oh, I haven't been in there yet.
Okay, so that. And the Toy Story Zoetrope.
So hold on, you're saying get high, buy a ticket, go up into the old May Company circular golden thing, which is right on the corner of Wilshire and Fairfax.
Of Wilshire and Fairfax. And on the inside, I think it's on the 2nd floor. It might be the 3rd. Is this round screen, almost completely around you, and there's like 3 screens, and it's different. It's like different topics from. It'll be like aliens. It'll be space travel. It'll be, all the way back to that first one with the Lumiere brothers where the rocket launches and hits the moon in the eye.
Yeah.
To like stuff that came out 2 years ago. And, it kind of shows you what the different tropes are. And then there's the Toy Story Zoetrope, which is all the little, what they call maquettes that they're all there, and then they start to swirl around, and the blinking lights, and that's what animates them, and it shows the little guys jump. So, and you can just watch that thing all day.
Let's wrap up with this very important question. Should venues like the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures let people bring in their vapes and get high in front of a place like that?
I think that there should be that. First of all, the people who consume cannabis have a lot of disposable income because they're consuming cannabis. Like most people, there are, medical things, but which is why it gets back to the thing we were talking about, the $300 different things. It would be wise to, how most places, it's weird because cigarette smoking is so bad for you, but they still have that little, they call it a smoker's pole, which is like its own double entendre. But it's that skinny little thing where, all the people who smoke cigarettes have to stand out there like it's got a real bad like look to it, right? Like
it looks bad.
It looks bad. And
it doesn't look cool.
Yeah.
Because part of smoking cigarettes is to look cool.
Yeah.
But to be grouped out there like
like you've been exiled.
Right.
And why not find a way, even if it's something as simple as that?
Yeah.
To find a way to include cannabinoid Americans in your programming.
I'm willing to go a step further. I'm willing to say because it is vapor, please.
Oh, so you're saying not even allow like joints, but
just be okay with it.
Yeah.
Because you only need a few puffs.
Yeah.
And maybe have a little signs like take it easy on the clouds. Because that's another thing I like about the PAX era. It doesn't produce a lot of clouds, so you don't have these show-offs out there trying to like make some statement.
Right.
Just get high and look at the zoetrope.
Yeah. And by the way, you'd move so many bags of chips. I mean, right?
You got to make money somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, there are ways to include. Everybody wants to be included.
Yes.
Everybody wants to feel like they're accepted. And I mean, especially the Academy Museum, who do you think goes to movies? High people.
Who do you think makes them?
High people.
Who do you think acts in them?
High people, especially Seth Rogen.
Here's another con of smoking weed. It does sometimes for me ruin my energy level. So maybe I do want to write for an hour. And then I see my packs and I smoke. And all of a sudden, after 10 minutes, I just want to go to sleep. Does that happen to you?
I do not work high. And I don't get high in the middle of the day. It is something, and this goes all the way back. Like everyone talks about journalists, like, oh, they keep a bottle of rum in the thing. And I'm like, I like to drink. I don't like to drink and work.
Yeah.
I think, I don't.
Because it's going to demotivate you, right?
Well, then it's like, I'm trying to like lasso words, like, and they're just like all jumping around, all wiggly piggly. It's like, it's great to come up with ideas when you're high, when you're not on the clock.
So
I also, as much as I feel like I fight authority, I also feel like it makes me break out even thinking about it now. It makes me start to sweat. Like, oh my God, what if I was like super high and needed to do something? And like, even when I went to these events, I don't consume. If I'm working, I don't consume. If I'm consuming, I don't work.
People at our event were saying, "Why have you tasted it yet?" And I was like, first of all, I'm driving home. I drove you home.
Yep.
But also, you're trying to teach me stuff, and I'm trying to be a good audience.
Yeah.
And this is clearly nobody else was on our level.
Yeah.
But I felt the same way. Is I forget enough stuff as it is.
Yeah.
And so I want to understand. I drove all the way over here to learn. Let me learn for a minute.
Yeah.
I'll have plenty of time back home to fire up Disney Plus and see how good the stuff is.
Yeah.
So you're the same way. The majority of the time that you are consuming is after hours.
Is off the clock.
Right.
The very few exceptions were because I went back to nostalgia with one of the food writers, and we're working on a story about the cannabis infused supper club, and that has its own arc. And then when I had people over to test these beverages, because there was no way I was going to test.
Oh, crap. Now we got to talk about those.
Okay.
So I love Can. Can I liked, and I was surprised that I liked it because it's such a low THC component, but it did the trick. If I mean, even though I'm a pretty mellow dude, I get stressed out, and sometimes I don't want to be so high that I want to fall asleep and take a long nap. Can, I think, has like 3% or 5%?
2 milligrams. I think it's
2 milligrams.
Yeah, the milligrams are really
of
low.
THC.
They call it a social tonic because it's.
But it was.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that they have backed away from that a little bit, and now they make 5 milligram version.
Well, see, that's just it, and that's the difference between like Wonder. Are you familiar?
No.
Wonder is WUNDER. They have like certain number of milligrams of THC and then delta 8 THC, which is a whole other story. But they have what they call higher vibes, which is a higher level, and then they have session, which and I never knew for a long time. What do you know what session beer is? It's lower alcohol, so you can drink more of them.
Okay.
So in that way, and I think to counter what we were talking about earlier about overdoing it, is that if you have the lower milligrams, you can drink one. Mm-hmm. If you're not thinking about it, and you just happen to guzzle one without thinking about the milligrams.
Yeah.
And then you can be like, okay, natural stopping point, wait and see how it affects you.
Yeah.
To sort of baby step. So
my only issue with can is I was going to a backyard party, and I was like, what do I bring to this thing? And I was like, oh, they sell can at the dispensary, but they're $5 each. And for such a low milligram of weed, or whatever you want to call it, THC, I felt like that's kind of a ripoff. Should I not look at it that way?
You should not look at it that way.
Okay.
That's actually the big challenge in the cannabis space overall is like when you go looking for a bottle of wine to bring to a party, do you go, what's the alcohol content and what's the price? Right?
Yeah.
Like you don't do that. And it's like if you wanted to maximize, you'd be bringing Mad Dog 2020, right? or Everclear.
Good point.
Is that you have to move away because we're all hung up on the THC content.
We are.
It's not gasoline octane, right? Because that's one of the few places where it's like whatever this percentage of stuff is important.
I guess I was worried about what my friends love me. They're not going to criticize me, but I was nervous that they would drink it and be like, okay, so I got a little buzz. It costs $5 for that buzz. So maybe again, I should teach them what you just said.
I think you're projecting.
Am I projecting?
Yeah, and you don't want to be laughed at, or
look at how I'm dressed. I'm not too worried about that.
Yeah, that is stylish. That is some. You got some fireworks. You got Abraham Lincoln with his sunnies.
Yeah.
No, I think you need to make the decision and then know enough about the product that you're bringing.
Yeah.
To be able to explain it, and that's why. Are you familiar with the Drew Martin joints? They're a botanical infused pre-roll. And it's like they mix cannabis with rose petals and mint, or chamomile and yerba mate, or yerba buena. Mm-hmm. So it actually decreases the amount of cannabis in the joint. So it's more like a session thing, and they are actually it's beautifully packaged. It's a wonderful taste. It's like one of the few joints that my wife likes because she'll smoke it and she won't be like boom boom alcohol lights.
Right.
But they have this wonderful product, but they're battling the THC percentage mindset. So you just need to learn. You need to find something that you like, that you want to bring and share. Mm-hmm. Learn about it, share it, and the whole thing is like what affects you is different than what affects me.
True.
Like,
but I do like the can because it's mellow. For example, just last weekend we were also at a party. Now we're all in our 50s. We're Gen X, and some of the people don't drink because they can't anymore.
Yeah.
Some of us don't drink because what good is 2 drinks? And like we're not making out at parties anymore. Like, what is the purpose of this? And so most of us were just drinking pop.
Yeah.
And it was kind of cute. Like, we weren't, like, ribbing each other for it or anything like that. But I like can because it gives me just enough of a buzz with no headache afterwards.
And if somebody goes, well, Tony, why'd you bring this 5 milligram thing and it costs $5? Say, that's the premium I pay for you not splashing through the pool like a moron.
Right.
Like, just
but also sometimes just one hit off of a joint will give me a headache. And who wants headaches? So this can thing was really good. Do you have an alternative to can that you really like?
I think one of the more unique ones. Are you familiar with Keef? Original Cola. It
No.
started in Boulder in 2010. Came to California in 2019. They have 5 core soda flavors, like a orange Kush. So they're like play on orange and thing. Or the original Cola. It's like, and we did these by taste. This
Yeah.
is by taste. And it's got a punch of cola. It's the kind that if you were a crossfading person, you would mix that with rum and bye-bye.
Really?
Yeah, it would be. And so it was good. It was really good. And then there are some, there's one called Rickett. That's Rickett Brewing Company. He was the guy who told me about the nano emulsion thing. There's a couple brands who do this. They make a wine, or they buy a wine. They full-on wine with alcohol in it. Use some sort of technological wizardry to completely remove the alcohol, because you can't have a product that has alcohol and cannabis in it in the state of California. And uses the alcohol to make hand
Governor
sanitizer,
Newsom, come on now.
right?
I mean,
No, come on. Like we have enough problems with. Come on, let's just.
but the 2 cash crops of California.
I think you should need to get a cross-fading license, to be honest. To have
Is
the
it that
vote.
powerful?
No, but just if you're doing it, if you're like, come on, we have enough problems. Let's just.
All right, fine.
So they spin out the wine. They spin the wine, the alcohol out of the wine, put the alcohol and make hand sanitizer out of the alcohol.
Oh.
And then take this thing that is a de-alcoholized Sauvignon Blanc, carbonate it, put in the nano-emulsified THC,
So like the best grape juice ever.
and he puts it in a bottle, an amber bottle from France, with a. I can show you what it looks like.
Okay.
And it is elegant, and you have to. It's got foil on the cap, so you take it off. It feels very much like a champagne, and because the onset is 10 to 15 minutes, it's much closer to the feeling of having. And it actually got rave reviews.
Mr. Tschorn, this has been a pleasure.
I really enjoyed it. I hope you did as well.
I hope it also shout out to the LA Times for allowing you to have this beat. We'll call it that. For treating it the way it should be treated, which is with respect and without any madness. I hope that you get to do really, really fun things once it becomes federally legal.
I am thankful every single day that I have editors and coworkers that believe in. If they don't believe in it, they believe in me talking about it in a way that destigmatizes it. And I feel like the luckiest man in the entire world.
You just might be. Thank you, Adam.
You're welcome. Thank you.
How great was Adam? You know who we'd share a joint with even now? Our Patreons. When you stoke us, you're saying, not sure how this is legal, but it's great and we should celebrate it. So shout out to our Patreons, Nancy Rommelman, Sean Atlow, Matt Mills, Sean Wallace, Greg and Molly, Jamie Taylor, Mark Johnson, Kira Ann, Barney Grinke, Ben Welsh, Henry Furman, Jen Adams, The Lonely Chair, Trevor Wilson, Bree Wild, Dougie Gyro, Christina Up North, and Robin Carey. Want to hear your name at the end of next week's show? Go to patreon.com/hereinla and give till it hurts. Also, shout out to our Angelinos. To be an Angelino, all you got to do is PayPal us $25 or more, and we will list you on the Here in LA website or on the Medium blog forever. You will also be given a number to denote how early you got in. For example, Angelino number 1, Allie Miller. 2, George Wright. 3, Rita Joanne. 4, Jason Sutter. 5, Grant Houghton. 6, Rob Baker. 7, Kev Chang. 8, Brenda Garcia. And 9, John Griffiths. Just PayPal your hard-earned cash to busblog@gmail.com. Want to support us, but you're saving up for one of those fancy $300 pipes? You can still help. Post your favorite episode on your Facebook. Post this episode on your Facebook. It'd be a little brave. Your friends would say, "What? This man listens to podcasts?" If you want to go crazy, post 2. Tweet something nice about this. Anytime you see me tweet about an episode, retweet it. It's free. And for God's sake, tell your friends. Tell them how Here in LA is spelled, and it's on Apple Podcasts and Google and Spotify and Pocket Casts and Amazon. Here in LA is produced by myself, Tony Pierce, and a man who's put together 63 of these episodes and should be applauded, Mr. Jordan Katz. Editing, mixing, and music supervision by Jordan Katz. Songs by Orgone and Jordan Katz. I think I heard some new ones in there. Special thanks to Cindy for creating the logo, Jen for inspiring this, and brave newspaper editors everywhere who are begrudgingly allowing the barely legal world of weed to be written about like it's no big deal. Live up to your promise, Joe Biden.